Well, good morning and welcome to 755 Live, about 5 minutes of what Jesus said. These commands of Jesus are also found at our weekday Bible plan at bible.today.church. And what we do is we take a command, a teaching, or an example that Jesus gave, put it into a soundbite version so that we can easily remember and apply it, because Jesus said to go make disciples by teaching them all the things that I have commanded you. Today's soundbite, Jesus said, watch out for false teaching. This comes from Matthew 16. We're going to read verse 6 and verses 11 through 12. Just to kind of set some context before we read here, the Pharisees had just asked Jesus, they said, show us a sign from heaven. And Jesus responded, that you won't get any sign but the sign of Jonah, which he was referring to the way that he would die and be buried for 3 days. And Jesus had gone across the Sea of Galilee in a boat, and the disciples got there later, and they realized that they forgot bread. Okay, so that's where we're picking up this story in Matthew 16, verse 6. Watch out, Jesus said to them. Beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. In the next few verses, the disciples are like, why did Jesus say this? Is it because we forgot bread? But Jesus turned to them and said, no, why are you arguing about bread? That's not what this is about. And we're going to pick up the story in verse 11. How could you not understand that I was not speaking to you about bread, but beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees? Those were the religious rulers of the day. Then they understood that he had not told them to be on guard against the yeast in bread, but against the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. The yeast that Jesus said to watch out for is the teaching, the false teaching of the hypocrites. Yeast changes what it's exposed to. It causes growth and expansion, and that can be in a good way, or it can be in a destructive way. Jesus used the word here, doctrine, didache in the Greek. There's a document from the first century that also has that name, and it literally means teaching that leads to action. It's not just philosophy, it's teaching that leads to action. And Jesus said, watch out for false teaching that leads to false action. In other places, Jesus said to do what the Pharisees said, but not what they did, because they were teaching things that led to the wrong action. Beware of false teaching. Watch out for false teaching. Good words, correct information can be incomplete. In fact, there's a lot of that today, with very little accountability to actually change. If you scan through the top-selling Christian books, there's very little about actually obeying Scripture or obeying what Jesus said. It's information-based, not obedience-based teaching. Many of the topics today are about self-help, which is not a bad thing, or about being successful, or about being a good leader. Those aren't bad things, or even understanding the right theology. Those aren't bad things unless they're taught in a way that leads to the wrong action. It's not the words or the belief that Jesus was running against, it's false teachings that don't really change us. Jesus said at the end, in Matthew 24, he said that sin would be rampant everywhere and the love of men would grow cold, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. There's this teaching out there that says, yeah, you don't have to really do anything to follow Jesus. But Jesus never said, follow me, it's more fun. He never said, follow me and be successful. He said, take up your cross daily and follow me. And that's really where happiness is. That's where real blessing is. That's where the John 10:10 abundant life is. The yeast of false teaching will quickly expand and increase unless we guard against it. False teaching is anything that leads to false action. The truth is when we deny ourselves and give up everything to follow Jesus. And Jesus said to make sure that we watch out for false teaching. So be careful. Make sure that what you're following, who you are following, sounds and looks like what Jesus did and said. And we can tell the difference by people's fruit. Jesus said, watch out for false teaching. How can we put that into action